Hello, everyone, and welcome to I believe this is 94th episode of the Anatomy of Knitting podcast. My name is Erin, and I'm going to be your host. In this episode, we'll talk about the week in review. We'll talk about, a finished object. We shall talk about what's on my needles, and then I'll probably talk a little bit about the knitting and stitching show that I attended in London. So, let's get started. The week in review, I went to London, and the boys had their weekend with their daddy, and it went apparently really well. They go to what's called Rugby Tots, which is a toddler activity group that we have them signed up for, and they learn how to play rugby. At least, as much as toddlers can learn how to play rugby. They learn how to score a try, which is you push the ball down on the ground with the laces facing down. They learn how to do a twisty pass and all sorts of other kind of rugby things. And apparently they did really well. I guess they kind of sort of missed me, but didn't, they weren't screaming and crying in their milk that they missed their mom. So it went really well that I was gone, and it usually does. As long as one parent is here, the boys are usually pretty good. Since I've been back, I've done my best to, go out and do something every day. So Monday we went to the playground, the Ballincollig playground. That's not too far from our house. It's got a lot of really tall slides that they like to ride on. And then Tuesday we went to a toddler group where with the trampolines at the gymnastics club, and they love that one. And then yesterday, we went to the grocery store, and I can see our local grocery store from our house, the Tesco. And so I said to the boys, okay, we have some shopping we need to do. We were all out of bananas because you ate them all. So let's go shopping and get some bananas. And they did spectacularly. I'm really impressed how the boys did when we went to the grocery store. Malcolm held my hand the entire way up there. Nathaniel kind of went ahead of us, but he always stayed within a good distance from us. And he listened when we got to an intersection, and he had to stop, and he couldn't go out into the street. And he held my hand when we went across the busy road. And then when we got into the grocery store, they have the metal baskets that you could put your purchases in while you're shopping. And so I grabbed one of those, and Nathaniel was like, no, I carry it. I want to carry it. So I let him carry it, and Malcolm helped me pick out a bunch of bananas, and we put it in the basket, and then Nate was like, oh, this is heavy. So I ended up holding one, the basket, it's got two handles like this that come up. And so I grabbed on one side, and then Nate grabbed on the other. And then Malcolm ended up grabbing onto the wire basket. So the three of us were walking through Tesco with our shopping, and it was really cute. Let's see. What else happened? Oh, Malcolm destroyed my phone. Let's see if I can show you how. I have it in the plastic. Let's see. It doesn't have a SIM. Yeah, there you go. You can see it. I have it in the plastic because the screen is shattered, and there's all these little tiny glass shards floating around. We were FaceTiming with my mom, which we do most every night, and it's while they're brushing their teeth upstairs, and they brush their teeth, we talk to Grammy. Oh, goodness. I swear I didn't yawn before I started recording, and now I'm like yawn city. Anyway, Malcolm sort of tipped it over, and I guess it was close to the edge of the windowsill that it was sitting on, and it landed on the tile floor and broke. And yeah. So after my husband and I went to the Immigration Bureau because we got our letter and I'm back from my trip, then I got a new phone. So it's the white iPhone 6, I think. Yeah. Once I'm done talking to you, I'm going to set this bad boy up and Yeah, this should last me another I tend to go through phones about every 2 years. And this is the first phone that I've had that's shattered, so yeah, that's about the week in review. Let's talk about finished objects. Here is the finished leaving cowl that I told you about. Yeah, you can see the leaves nicely. That I told you about. Oh, I have it inside out. That I told you about last podcast. I have since blocked it. And when I blocked it, what I did was I just soaked it into the sink and then put it on my blocking board and sort of patted it out so the lace would pop nicely. Let's see if I can just get one single layer of fabric so you can see the lace. I didn't pin, I didn't use any blocking wires, and I think it turned out pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with it. There, yeah, there you can see the texture there. So there are all those leaves. This is a free pattern on Ravelry, and it's the Leaving, Leaving cowl. I'm really pleased with it. I wore it outside this morning for the first time. So I wore it when I went to the Garda station. I wore it when I walked around downtown afterwards because I had a few errands to run. And I wore it on the bus home. So yeah, that's my finished object. Since then, I have been working on a sweater. And this is out of the yarn that I was telling you about a couple of weeks ago. This is the Madeline Tosh Vintage, which is their worsted weight merino yarn. And you can see, especially in this one, it's sort of a green overdyed with black yarn. Yeah, you can see it in this one too now. So I have since cast on, give me a moment, I'm having a brain fart. It's the Harvest Cardigan by Tin Can Knits. It features a garter collar that you can see here. So what you do is you cast on provisionally and then knit a big tab for the garter, and then you pick up, you knit stitches here, you pick up along the edge of the band, and then you start knitting your raglan, which is where I am right now. To me it looks quite green. It's hard to tell if it's as green. I have a fair amount of light coming in, which is why I have to squint to see it. So yeah, I'm in the thick of doing the raglan increases prior to taking the stitches off for the sleeves. I've had one hiccup with this sweater already. I didn't read through my directions clearly, and didn't realize that I also had to start increasing here for next to the garter neckband. And so I had done maybe like 8 rows of increases just on the raglan sides and not on the collar side, and then had to rip all that out, which was not pleasant, as you can imagine. So there is that. I'm using my signature needles in US 8s, which are 5 millimeters. I did a swatch prior to casting this on. Here it is, right in front of me. So there's the swatch, and it's washed and dried and all that fun stuff. I typically swatch for sweaters. I think it's pretty important to figure out an accurate gauge. I don't typically swatch for, like I didn't swatch for that cowl, I don't swatch for socks, but sweaters I typically swatch for. Right now I haven't done any adjustments to the pattern here, although I must not have followed directions quite perfectly, because when I knit the garter band, one side is knitting fine using the knit stitch, but the other one I must be off about half of a stitch or half of a row or something, because I have to purl the other garter band to get it to look like garter stitch. I have to purl both sides. So I'm not exactly sure what happened there. I must have done something odd, but it's not a big deal to knit one side and purl the other, both rows. You just have to remember which one is which. And it's not that hard, because when you start doing it wrong, it's pretty obvious. Let's see. So yeah, that's what I've been knitting on. I haven't been knitting on those socks that I told you, the Seahawks socks. Those have stayed in their bag. I didn't take any knitting with me on my trip. Might as well start talking about that. Because I checked the website for, like traveling in Ireland and traveling in the EU. And they said that knitting needles weren't allowed on board. And I thought about maybe trying to sneak on some wooden ones. But then I just decided it just wasn't worth it. So, yeah, I didn't have any knitting with me when I went to London. And the Knitting and Stitching Show was held at the Olympia Centre, which is in sort of the Kensington neighborhood, which is where I spent the majority of my time. I would say about 80% of the time. I stayed at the Airbnb that I stayed in last year, and it was lovely and nice. And yeah, it was a good time. Last year it was a lot about quilting and knitting, purchases wise. This year I didn't purchase as much stuff, but I think what I did purchase was pretty good. I took 2 classes. One was on fabric manipulation, where we learned how to do pin tucks. We learned how to do frills and sushi rolls and pleats, and I want to say there's one more that I'm forgetting. I can't remember what the last one is. It's gone. Whatever it was, it's gone. And then the second class I took was a cross-stitch class. And this is Jane Greenoff's Welcome to a CC Embroidery. It's not embroidery, it's cross-stitch. And so the class project was to do this little tile. And I had done cross-stitch before, back when I was in college, prior to myself learning how to knit. And so I hadn't quite done it in a while. But this was the first time I have stitched on linen. You'll see that linen is a little different than regular cross-stitch fabric. I think Aida is the cross-stitch fabric, and it's woven a little differently. And you'll see I've gotten the main center portion done, and I've started doing the little leaves up on the top. So that should be done in the next week or so. It's kind of nice just to sit and stitch on the cross stitch a little bit instead of doing some knitting. Yep, so that was my other class. I don't have the fabric here with me, it's upstairs, but I did buy fabric to make this dress. This is the 1950s Rose, and this is by So La Di Da Vintage in Dorset. And so there's an instruction book on how to, there's a picture of it in fabric. See how it hangs nicely. It's going to have that sweetheart neckline. And then it's just got a big sheet of paper that has the pattern on it. So I traced this out onto Swedish tracing paper and have made some adjustments because per my size, my bust fits in the measurements here, but my waist wouldn't fit. So I increased the waist. And so now I have to do a toile. And for those of you who aren't familiar with dressmaking, a toile is like a practice garment. You can make it out of muslin, which is just a cheap and expensive fabric, or you can do it out of a less expensive fashion fabric. And what you do is you save your nice fabric that you're going to use for the dress, or whatever, until you've made all of the fit adjustments that you need to make. So I have a toile to make, and one of my things was to one of my chores, or not chores, but errands this morning was to find some muslin. I purchased some fabric at the Knitting and Stitching Show. It's sort of this black metallic fabric with copper flowers woven in it, which is really pretty. But I didn't want to start hacking into that and ruining it, because it was fairly, I wouldn't say it was expensive. Making this dress, spending all that I've spent, I probably would spend as much, or looks like there's a mailman pulling up, as much or an equivalent amount to buy a dress. So I'm going to pause you because the mailman is here. Okay, so that's done. Where was I? I was talking about the toile and fashion fabric, and then I've got my muslin. And the woman who owns the So La Di Da vintage company suggested that I also mount that metallic fabric onto another fabric to give it some more stability, because the weave of the metallic fabric kind of comes apart at the seams if you're not careful. So I got enough of that. It's just a black, I wouldn't say it's cheap, an inexpensive black fabric that I will, I bought enough to make the toile and to make, and to mount the nicer fabric on. So I think that's the plan for today, is that I might cut out that toile. I think so. I have lunch. Let's see. There was a lot. I took a lot of pictures of quilting, and some fashion garments that some students had made. But there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of new and exciting things in the world of knitting, sadly. The one company I really enjoyed, the Toft, I think it's Toft, T-O-F-T, yarns. I made that big eyelet cowl last year out of it. It was a kit, and it came with the pattern and the yarn. They were there again this year, but they were selling yarn for like crochet animals, and that's not my jam this year, so I decided to pass over there. And there just wasn't a whole lot of new and exciting things, sadly, at the Knitting and Stitching Show, knitting-wise. Yeah, I think that's about it. I don't really have a lot more to talk about. Traveling was uneventful. It's interesting when you fly from here to England. There's no like passport check that you go through, which is interesting. But there's a passport check when you come from England to here. And my husband, because we had the temporary extension stamp in our passports, my husband was a little concerned that the guards there wouldn't let me in, because I don't know, he was confused of the stamp that I had or whatever. And I kept telling my husband, don't worry, this is what they do. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm going to be able to get back in. And he apparently brought like all of his documentation, like his work permit, his passport, our marriage license. He just brought everything. Excuse me. Everything with him. And when it came time to go through the immigration, I handed the man my passport, and he kind of looked at me and he was like, okay, like, how long are you going to be here, kind of thing. And before he had a chance to start saying anything, I said, I live here. My husband works for EMC, and we have a temporary extension because he's applied for stamp 4, and the extension stamp is on page 16. If you take a look at that, so the man opens up to page 16 and he sees it, and he starts laughing because he knows the person who signed my passport, the stamp. So small world. He was like, okay, you're good, and gave my passport back to me, and all was well. So I told my husband that it's just, you be extremely polite and people won't give you a hard time. It's when you're, kind of a jerk that they'll be a hard time. They'll give you a hard time. So that's it. I'm going to put some pictures at the end, probably from the Knitting and Stitching Show, and maybe some from the boys. So I hope you enjoy those. I should be back next week. Next week is St. Patrick's Day, so the boys might be here. If that's the case, I'll record while they nap. Because that's the question that we had for the crash today, is if there was school next week. So if they're at the crash, I'll record as usual. If they're here, I'll record during nap time. And then the next following week, we'll have to pick up our immigration stuff that we applied for today. So there may not be a podcast in 2 weeks, but there will be next week. So it will be St. Patrick's Day, which is different here. It's like the 4th of July here, or it's like the 4th of July in the States. It's the best way I can describe the St. Patrick's Day. So that's it. Thank you for watching. If you are going to purchase a class from Craftsy, please do me a favor and just head over to the website, theanatomyofknitting.com. There's an ad on the, it's the right sidebar. If you could click on that, they track where their traffic comes from, and they give me a little bit of ad revenue in thanks for putting the ad on my shop or my website. Yeah, so if you could do that. Thankfully, the last little bit of check that they sent me paid for 2 months of hosting fees, which was awesome. So I thank you all for using those links. Yeah, and so I shall see you next week. So bye.